we do have reports of Iranians trying to take refuge, escape the bombing in neighboring countries. None of them have asked UNHCR for intervention. I suppose that everybody believes this may be, hopefully, not a long, drawn situation and people will go back. But there's no doubt in this day and age, unfortunately, I'm talking to you from Damascus of all places. And the paradox is that this Syria, which for a long time has been a hub of violence and displacement, is now one of the few islands where there is an opportunity to actually solve a crisis. But surely this new conflict between Israel and Iran casts a shadow on even the pockets of hope in a very troubled region.
Filippo, what is your greatest concern right now based on what you're seeing and your assessment of how things are developing?
Well, naturally, the first concern that I have as a humanitarian, even before being the High Commissioner for Refugees, is that civilians, once again, in this conflict, be they in Iran or in Israel, are impacted. And this is the pattern that unfortunately we see in all conflicts. Think of Gaza, think of Congo, think of Sudan, of Myanmar, and all over the world. We've just put out our yearly report on refugees. And yet again, after, it's been 10 years, year after year, the number of refugees and displaced has increased again to now 122 million. And this is really a sign of the times. And again, this new conflict, same patterns, inevitably it causes displacement. And like I said, it can destabilize further the region, especially if the conflict escalates further and spreads beyond the two countries. And this is why I think the UN Secretary General's appeal for restraint and de-escalation and the appeals of many other leaders are extremely important.
You also mentioned Gaza there, and of course, again, if you speak as a humanitarian, the situation there is dire. The focus of the world right now is with this war between Israel and Iran, but people are struggling to get basic food. There is even a water shortage there at the moment. We have been continuing our coverage of the situation in Gaza, and it feels relentless, like there is no end in sight.
And again, civilians, as we see on screens every day, are impacted in the most cruel fashion. Last night I was watching a report on media on a hospital in Israel, in Beersheba, I think, that had been hit by a missile, and people were rightly frightened and lamenting that civilians had been impacted. And the same happens in Gaza with Israeli bombardments, and then in Iran. You see, I think that all these situations that cross each other demonstrate one point, that international humanitarian law is important and needs to be upheld by everybody in war.
Filippo, you mentioned that you're in Damascus at the moment. And as you say, 10 years ago, it was the Syrians we were seeing, the bulk of the people who were fleeing their homes and what was then described as the migrant crisis trying to enter Europe were Syrians at the time. Just give us a sense of the situation now since the fall of Bashar al-Assad and how things are evolving there in Damascus, and the fact that many people, many Syrians are returning.
Yes, these are a situation in which sometimes you think that things go full circle, don't they? I started my assignment, the current one, as High Commissioner for Refugees, in the middle of that crisis when hundreds of thousands of Syrians were moving from this region towards Europe in the midst of a terrible civil war. And now, 10 years later, I'm here in a country that has actually received some of those refugees back. We think that, we estimate that since the fall of the Assad regime, so beginning of December, 600,000 Syrians have returned, mostly one should say, from the neighboring countries. But then you see Syria is also the theater of a very large internal displacement. Lots of people displaced from one country, one part of the country to the other over the years of war, and millions of them, but 1.5 million have gone back to their homes again during the same period. So in a way, you can say Syrians, in spite of all the uncertainty of the future, the instability in the region, the fragility of their own country, are voting with their feet. They want to go back and rebuild. This is why they need so badly the support of the international community in this endeavor.
Filippo, you talked there about the internally displaced. We know that sanctions have been lifted now on Syria, and the government is still weak, still trying to find its feet, still trying to come to terms with the trauma and devastation of the last decade, and frankly, for several decades now. Just give us a sense of how people are re-establishing themselves. Are they struggling? Do they need more support? Do they need more attention from the international community? Because that is a number of things that this country is dealing with. Not only are they struggling economically, not only are they dealing with the trauma and the pain of the past, but also the physical movement of people and where they live, how they live, and how they access basic things must be something that is of concern to you.
Absolutely. And today I actually drove from Beirut to here, from Lebanon to Syria. And as I was crossing the border, I met some of the Syrian refugees in Lebanon that were returning to Syria. So I spent time with them and asked them questions. One of them struck me because he told me, I'm going back to Homs, one of the most destroyed cities in the country. And I know, he told me, that my house is no more there, but I want to go back. It was very touching. He had a very young wife and a small baby, 21 days old. So I saw in that determination, in that courage, a lot of hope in the future of Syria. And in that small baby, almost a symbol of the future. But these are nice things to say. The reality is very, very hard. And I met the authorities this afternoon here in Damascus. They fully realized the challenges. They spoke about political challenges, economic challenges, security challenges. And in all areas, of course, they have the primary responsibility to bring the country towards the future, but they won't be able to do it without much help from the international community. I think the lifting of sanctions is a very positive gesture, and I think President Trump's decision to do so was very, very positive, because this opens up, for example, space for private companies to come to Syria and invest in reconstruction, and in so doing, they rebuild houses and they create jobs. This is really the type of intervention that Syria needs today, besides very urgent humanitarian assistance, which we deliver. So you have a short-term and a medium, long-term intervention that is needed. And I really hope that in this world so deprived of positive stories, there is focus, there is investments here, because it can really help turn things around in the next few months and years.
And finally, Filippo, you said you started your role 10 years ago, and you have about 6 months left in your tenure in your current role. What lessons would you say that you've learned that perhaps the international community should learn when it comes to refugees, the movement of people, and what can be done differently?
I think that I have covered this role during a decade of growing problems, growing challenges, more conflicts, more violations of human rights, more violations of international humanitarian law in situations of war, as I have described, and more hostility also dictated mostly by political reasons towards refugees, migrants, other people on the move. So that has been a big challenge. And I hope that we can continue to engage ourselves to counter these negative trends. But I would say that the other big lesson is that when you have a situation like Syria, and I am here in a place where we have a chance to have refugees who can stop being refugees and be back in their country, rebuilding their country. I think when you have these opportunities, it is important to take some risks and invest in the recovery and reconstruction. We had that chance in Sudan, if you remember, a few years back when the previous regime fell. I think I could observe the timidity of the international community in investing in the future of Sudan, and look at where we're now. Civil war, 14 million refugees and displaced, and even bigger crisis than Syria. So the big lesson of this year is when we have an opportunity, let's not waste it. There are still ways to get out of conflict and into a more prosperous and peaceful future for some populations. Let's not let them go away without grabbing them.